wanted to talk about forever chemicals, and so I'm like, well, what is a forever chemical? You hear that term thrown around, and then I found out it's in pizza boxes, which I thought was interesting because you think that that's just cardboard, but it's in pizza boxes, popcorn bags, sandwich wrappers, fast food, tampons.
It's a big one.
Why is it in a tampon?
I was dealing with some autoimmune issues after I got a particular shot. It was
so bad. Did you do all 3?
No, 1.
I did 2, and I had a pretty gnarly reaction too. I listened to your recent episode on circumcision.
It's like an epidemic in the U.S. It just became like the thing. Majority of countries, like most Europe, most like of South America, they're all uncircumcised.
It really started getting pushed during the Victorian era because they thought that masturbation and sex were the reason to blame for everything. Like it would make you go blind. It was the reason that you were sick. It was the reason that society was falling apart. So they said if we desensitize this part of the male body, and they even were doing to some females, that will cure everything. There are plenty of them that still do female genital mutilation, and that's part of their culture and part of their religion. So do we say that that's acceptable because it's part of their, and I say no.
We know that placentas are worth crazy amounts of money. This is medical waste that then gets sold to biomedical companies, to cosmetic companies, and then you have crazy celebrities like Oprah Winfrey, I'm pretty sure, was one of them.
It's in her favorite cream.
And the parents are thinking that this is medical waste. Sandra Bullock was like, she gets the penis facial with like literally neonatal fibroblast stem cells from foreskin of children. Parents will never know that this is actually what's happening on the back end, right? It's like, it's insane.
Hello, everyone. You are listening or watching Chatting with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Horbacz. Before we jump into the episode, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us beat the algorithm. So any little bit that you can do is very much appreciated. This week, we have the lovely Abby Fernandini joining the show. She is the chief executive pot stir. She used to be the content director for the Health Institute. She hosts the Journal of the Body podcast, which I highly recommend you guys check out. Add that to your download list. And we debated whether or not using the word wellness influencer, because like that could be taken a couple ways, but she is a great follow on social media. So let's jump in. Let's jump in and do this thing. What's wild is when you start feeling terrible and then you say, how much water have I had today?
And you're like, wait,
I've had 3 cups of coffee and a Celsius, 0 water. So maybe I should start there.
I had to switch to decaf because I was getting crazy anxiety from the caffeine postpartum. Like that was like a big shift for me because I was like, I don't know. I just, all of a sudden postpartum, I think it's just your minerals are so depleted. And I was like caffeinating on top of that, and that can also kind of cause mineral depletion when you're just peeing a lot because it's like a diuretic in some ways. I felt like I was like literally needed to be on anxiety meds because I was having such bad anxiety, and it turned out it was solely from coffee.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I believe now that like coffee can actually cause like some of these crazy symptoms. So,
well, a lot of things, right? I loved watching. I was like, I wish that you got pregnant before me. I do, because I was doing like, I was reading all the crunchy stuff, and then I was trying to find like a happy middle ground between
hard
everything.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and then some of it, if like you don't have an example ahead of you and all you're doing is reading and you're not seeing like someone prepare the food or prepare it, like you have influenced me so much. I don't think you realize.
I'm so happy to hear that.
I bought one of those prana mats after I saw it. It's like the Regina George, and when Regina George said this thing. No, so I bought one of those mats and I started using it, and then I'm trying to switch out all of my panties to organic. Yes, so I bought that one
has made
brand.
the biggest difference ever. Packed? Was it Packed
no,
or Made the Label? I don't know which one.
It's like they're really pretty, like the high briefs.
Higher Loyalty?
Yes, I got those.
I love her stuff. She's like local to my area, and she started it as like a small business, and because she's got a couple different businesses, and I was like obsessed with her cuts. I was like, these are just the most practical underwear ever. Like, I'm long gone are the days where I like am like, I don't know, you can. I used to go to Victoria's Secret for like the 6 for like 15, and it was just like such a bad era of mine.
Yeah, but they were so cute.
They were so cute. We need like cute lacy like we need like cute lacy organic cotton underwear. I don't know who.
She has one lacy pair of thongs that are pretty.
I haven't gotten those.
Yeah, so it looks kind of like the hanky pankies. Are you
Okay.
familiar with those? Like it
have not tried
stretches
those.
and then they don't crinkle
on
so
the-
that you can wear them under like a tight dress. But
those.
I think it's coming. So I guess for people that don't think it matters, like why should we care what we're putting on for our underwear?
Oh my gosh. Like, okay. I didn't have this realization until recently. So it started out with I have super sensitive skin. I am like the type of person, like hormonal acne the last 2 years, like pregnancy, postpartum, like it's been a journey just to like get it under control. And of course, like doing things internally tend to really like showcase differences, like when you're looking at like the external side of things, especially when it comes to skin, and skin is like heavily tied to the liver in traditional Chinese medicine. So I was kind of going down this rabbit hole of, okay, I really need to like figure out what some of my triggers are. And one of the biggest things that was causing me so much problem was I worked for Lululemon for a little bit. Like I was a Lululemon girl, like in college I worked for Lululemon. And I realized that I was paying for like polyester plastic, like dropping hundreds of dollars on like polyester fabric, where my like sweat would smell like different when I wore it. Like I would get like kind of weird, like just kind of like rashy. And that was like my first indicator for myself that I may or may not actually be allergic to some of the fabrics that they were using, because they were doing like all sorts of different like new material, but it was all just derivatives of polyester, which is petroleum derived. So it's not ideal. And so I went down this rabbit hole, found out that I was allergic to a lot of these plastic fabrics. And then I realized that they were causing pretty much all my UTIs that I was having. So like I was wearing like underwear, I would wear these tight leggings, and I would like come down with like really, really bad like UTIs randomly here and there. And I was like, okay, there has to be a link here. So I switched, like I personally made the switch, and I was like, okay, let me just see, like, is it going to change? Like if I wear cotton underwear, if I wear cotton leggings, if I wear like jeans, like things that are more breathable, is this going to change the way my body is reacting? And lo and behold, like these leggings that are plastic are bacteria like proliferators.
Whoa.
They literally like, it's like the bacteria just proliferate, and it's like one of the main reasons I'd see chronic UTIs in a lot of like girls that I would talk to, and you just like make a simple switch, and it was like, oh, it's because they're not breathing at all, and it's just, yeah. So
when you were doing your research, is there any like proof that, let's say you don't wear panties at all, and and I know a lot of women that don't, especially when they're wearing the leggings. So you put on these petroleum leggings with no panties, and you go do a hot yoga class, or you're just running around all day. Is that being absorbed through the vagina? Because obviously that.
So here's what I'll say about that. Do I think that there has been any funded studies that will actually specifically target like the vaginal region and like confirm that it's being absorbed? I highly doubt that like there's been that many, if any, studies that have confirmed that. But what I will say is, if you piece together what we know about the sweat glands and our pores, we absorb everything because the skin is our largest organ. And when you look at a more sensitive area like the vagina, it is one of the most absorbent like pieces of our body. Like in its the sacred womb, you think about things when you do yoni steams and a lot of these different practices. It's because of how absorbent like the layers are in that one region. So when you think about like the sweat glands and you think about our pores and how they're actually meant to detoxify those regions, we're detoxing when we sweat, but when we open up our pores, it's really important to be aware that we also do receive things in. So if you are wearing sweatpants that have PFAs, so polyfluoroalkyl substances, which a lot of...
I'm glad you said it, because I just had the letters written down. I was like, I'm just not going to even attempt to say that word.
I honestly had to practice it a few times because I got into a few conversations and I was like, I probably should know like how to like pronounce it. But like it's so interesting how many brands have been called out for it. Sports bras. And if you think about sports bras and how they're right there tight in the region where you have the most amount of like lymphatic glands. You have lymphatic glands right around your pelvic region. Like those are all very important areas when you're looking at detoxifying, and when you're looking at the sweat, and there it smells differently in these regions because it is one of the main excretory like regions for like the lymphatic system. So you also will receive, and the pores will open, and you will take in things. We know that that's studied, that's fact. Have we studied if the leggings are causing that? Probably it's coming, but it's not something that's been well enough researched yet. So I think that that's really interesting. And also you think about how often are you worried about your food being heated up in plastic, microwaved, it's stored in plastic in the stores. You're like constantly thinking about your food and how it's been stored in plastic, or I don't want to drink plastic water bottles because I'll be ingesting microplastics. It's like, well, you're literally wearing, might as well be a condom of plastic, like yoga, like
just
leggings. You're literally just like a plastic polyester, like, and you're sweating in it. You're going to hot yoga, like. It's really hard to, I don't know, it's really hard to be dogmatic in the health space because if you're going to get so caught up in one thing of your food being in plastic, then you should get caught up in the other areas too.
Right. Try to minimize it where you can.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you can't be dogmatic because there's so many regions that need to be improved that if you get like too hyper-focused in one, you're just forgetting other areas. So it's like, do what you can, do the best you can, and make little switches that like help you and work for your body.
Yeah, I was trying to look up some PFAs because I wanted to talk about forever chemicals, and so I'm like, well, what is a forever chemical? We don't, like, you hear that term thrown around, and then I found out, obviously it's in the Lulus, it's in pizza boxes, which I thought was interesting because you think that that's just cardboard, but it's in pizza boxes, popcorn bags, sandwich wrappers, fast food, tampons. It's
Crazy. A big one.
Why is it in a tampon?
That's a great question.
Floss. Yes. And almost 40% of all tap water. And if you don't care enough yet, folks, it can actually make your package smaller, which is what I found out.
It does make your package smaller.
So people can care about that.
It's like a testosterone killer. Like, it's no. And also in receipts, like, have you heard of the receipts? Like BPAs, PFAs. Yeah. So like receipts like are like a big thing that people touch all the time. And again, if you think about like absorbent regions in the body, like fingertips, your feet, because you detox like in these regions in traditional Chinese medicine, they correlate to like different things. Like, you constantly touching your receipts. It's like another way. So what do you just
say? I don't want it.
I don't want a receipt. I'm literally like, I don't need it. I don't want the receipt. I'm good. Thank you so much. Or I'll like be like, you can send it. I hate junk mail, but I'm like, I'd rather, if I have to get a receipt, I'm like, send it to my email. But again, you pick and choose like what you want to like focus on, and like try not to be I tried so hard not to be dogmatic because it's like we're all just out here doing our best, picking like what we can, figure out what works for us. And I don't know.
Well, you also don't want to get into a place where everything is an existential threat and then you become a hypochondriac. So I'm sure Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's talked about people that have come to his workshops and they eliminated everything, every like toxin, every potential like chemical poison, and they're still wildly sick or have a really bad autoimmune issue that no one can figure out what it is. And it's like, well, you're approaching the world like everything is going to harm you, so of course like your body is on high alert. So it's this like fine line and dance between, okay, I'm going to remove what I can, but also I'm not going to walk around the world with like gloves and a mask and a bubble. And
COVID was such an ouster for not only people who were like extreme germ freaks, but also for the holistic health space. I keep using the word dogma, but the way that people became, I feel like, online in the health scene was also so unhealthy because it really just showcased the two extremes like you're talking about. It's like, you can remove all the toxins. We could argue about terrain theory versus germ theory all day, but these two different groups of people are sitting on such extremes that they're both like suffering from insane chronic illness because, they can't live a normal life without this crazy fear like hanging over them. And I think I got like that a little bit at one point because when you like suffer from like an illness of some kind and it seems like very I don't know. I was dealing with some autoimmune issues after I got a particular shot. It was Gardasil, and
It's so bad.
It was
It's so bad.
so bad.
Did you do all 3?
No, one.
I did 2, and I had a pretty gnarly reaction too.
I had high liver enzymes to the point where my whole body was like swelling. And I was like, the only thing that makes sense is that I just had this shot and like my body is trying to detox. And liver enzymes obviously correlate because the liver has 500 functions. Its main responsibilities are processing things like pharmaceuticals, things like fats, proteins. Like it's got a ton of different functions. But of course, like something like a vaccine, it's going to be what it's used for. And I just had a terrible reaction. And that was like when I first started the journey. But then I got a little bit too gung-ho. And I think it like kind of like swerved me into a place where I was like, wow, like I couldn't even like go out and like eat normal things or like do normal things with people because I was so caught up with, oh, but does it have this in it? Or, oh, like what time are you guys doing that? Like I need to go to bed. Like stopped living.
Right.
So it's interesting because you kind of like, you had to find the balance, and it takes a few years after you like, I don't know, find your space and you like it. Like I loved the health scene, and I love the health scene, but definitely goes
Yeah,
far.
you could overdo anything.
Yeah.
Really, yeah. So when you talk about toxins, some of the pushback that some people say are your body is designed naturally, like speaking of the liver, to get rid of toxins. So when you see people that are pushing a certain protocol, program, elixir that they have white labeled, whatever it is, and you're like, well, first, like, what is the toxin? Like, so can you tell me a toxin? And then when do I need to add something to like supplement what my body's naturally doing? Because people talk about sauna a lot, or specifically infrared for getting rid of toxins, and then people are like, it's not toxins, it's sweat, dummy. But like you do lose some stuff through your sweat. I think we do know that. So how much do you think is kind of a scam, or like maybe certain people taking advantage of like this whole detox culture?
Totally.
And then when do you know to add something, and what is something in your experience that's beneficial?
Yeah. So that's like a really, really great question, because I think like I've had to hyper focus on my liver because of some of like the issues that I've like had in the past were very much so liver related. And I'm a big fan of traditional Chinese medicine. So like the body like contains qi, and different organs contain different energies. And for me, the liver was always the problem. And it can be so easy when you first are starting to get, like you said, get caught up with, oh, this detoxes your liver and this and that. And something that I had to realize is that there's two sides of the coin. It's like, yeah, there's the people that are screaming, your liver detoxes things for you. And then there's people that scream like a million different ways to detox. And so I was kind of like, I think when you first start, you're just like, wow, I don't really know how to unpack all of this. But what I read this book, and it was honestly amazing. And it was called The Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Flesh by Andreas Moritz. And there's some philosophies in the book that I agree with, and there's some that I don't. But the premise is, okay, if we were functioning in our ancestral way, sure, the liver does an incredible job of detoxing and removing. And if we have enough minerals in our diet, and minerals counterbalance heavy metals and these other things, they work on balance beams, and minerals work with other minerals on these balance beams. If we were living in our ancestral reality, or like, I guess, ideology, we would have a functioning, well-performing liver. But if you look at the way that people in the Western world live, it is completely incompatible with the liver's design and function. It's impossible to ask the liver to do all of the jobs that it's required to do. And so I think that that's where we get lost, is we can look at the spectrum and say, well, the liver's designed to do this. Well, great. Okay, if you go to Eastern Asia, or if you go to remote parts of this place, maybe the liver is doing a great job. It's doing what it's designed to do. They don't have many problems. Very few like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, unlike in the US, where we have an epidemic of like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it doesn't make sense. So the reality is that Western culture, we are drinking terrible water, we are eating terrible food, we are like the average American is on something like 4+ pharmaceuticals, like, you know, by the age of, I don't even know the statistic and I don't want to like mess it up, but when you think about all of the things, being on birth control since you were 14, like I was on birth control since I was a teenager,
Same.
like for a long time. Those are all things that the liver is responsible for, like metabolizing, breaking down, and excreting. And ultimately excretes out of, you know, the lymphatic system, your excretory processes, things like sweat, things like urine, things like stool. But if you've got gut problems, you're dealing with things like IBS, colitis, or your chronic constipation. One, you're not actually removing those things once the liver has maybe metabolized. Maybe it's getting reabsorbed into the body. Maybe you're dealing with hormone imbalances, which the liver also has a huge role in getting rid of excess hormones during female cycles. So excess estrogen, like maybe you're dealing with these, the liver just feels exceptionally overwhelmed, and it does not have a way or a place to put all these things because maybe other processes in the body are not also optimally functioning. And so it's like, one, if you live in a Western culture, detoxing is a wonderful thing. And it's like, how do you detox, right? Like, what is the right thing, like you said? And this is kind of where I go is, in all other cultures of the world, people are fasting. People are doing water fasts. Yeah, you can get caught up with juice cleanse and say, yeah, they're bad. Yeah, they're good. Oh, they spike blood sugar. Oh, they this. Oh, they that. The reality is that other cultures all over the world are fasting. They take time. It's a spiritual ritual. It, I mean, depends on which religion you're looking at. They'll do water fasts. They'll do, you know, certain fasts. I really actually like bone broth fasts where you're like, you know, it's like maybe a bone broth cleanse where you do it for like 4 to 5 days and you're drinking
Just
nothing but
broth.
that. Yeah, maybe lemon water, some other like facets, but like we don't do that here, and we don't parasite cleanse here either because we're Western and we don't think that we catch parasites. So we're just like left to all of these things accumulating in the body. And so, like I said, this book that I read, The Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Flesh by Andreas Moritz, there's things that I really like about the book, and it explains all of the other systems and processes in the body and how the liver can impact those things. So even things like red eyes, even things like IBS, colitis, it talks about what happens with the liver when it's not optimally functioning. And then it gives you a protocol for how to detoxify. And like I said, there's a lot of liver cleanses out there. And I'd say in traditional Chinese medicine, one of the best things that you can do is go for herbs that support the liver instead of like rushing right into a cleanse, because I think that, like I said, there's a lot of cleanses out there. Some of them are BS. Some of them are, you know, better, but all in all, you just need to take like gradual steps when you're looking to do something like this. And so starting with herbs is like kind of the way I would do it. It's like you take things like milk thistle and dandelion, you drink them in teas, maybe you get them in capsules, and you start a general, like a gentle cleanse, and you make sure that you're getting enough minerals and you're getting enough sleep, and you do the basics first. You don't go and jump into a cleanse, because if you're not getting enough sleep and you're not eating correctly and you're not drinking clean, great mineralized water, like your body is not necessarily always going to respond well to a cleanse long term.
I was going to say, is there a potential if you go from 0 to 100, let's say you're a normal American diet, so you're fast food, it's all bad, right? You're bad sleep, you're overstressed, this combination of things, and you just go straight for like the most extreme cleanse. Can you just have a dump that makes you really sick?
Yeah. I mean, that's the reality, is like when you're doing any of these types of things, whether it's parasite cleansing, I'd say like maybe liver cleansing potentially, because when you do a liver flush of sorts, you are also going to, parasites live in the liver, like they live in liver gallstones, and heavy metals are in that, all those things, right? So you can have something called a Herx reaction whenever you detox in any form. And Herx reactions can happen for a wide variety of reasons. And that's why it's like really important to take things like kind of step by step and try to like get the 5 basics first, which is like clean water, clean food, good sleep, making sure you're exercising, and then making sure you're managing your stress and like having good relationships and stuff. It's like do those things first. And then let's talk about like protocols if you are like having chronic illness and dealing with those types of things. Then we start with like the different herbs and introducing the tinctures and like see how your body does, adjust like accordingly. And then, oh, now that I've gotten to this place, now let's see, do I want to try to go for a flush like Andreas Morris teaches? Do I want to try to do a bone broth fast where my body kind of, or a water fast where you just kick it into cellular autophagy where your cells kind of, they basically just have turnover. You have cell turnover and that really helps for cancer prevention, parasitic activity, liver, all of it. It's a general reset. And so I always say you don't really need a lot of fancy protocols to do. Cell core is great. Like that's a good protocol for if you're looking to liver flush, parasite, all of that stuff. Their protocols are great, but like you don't need to get caught up with a lot of what's on the market because it's BS.
It's really interesting that a lot of people are talking about fasting specifically if you have active cancer as a way to try to like reverse it and get rid of it.
Yeah.
But no one talks about that if you actually go to a hospital. They're like, oh, well, we'll just do chemo. And obviously like that has worked for some people and a lot of people, but they don't approach it from any other angle. It's just the really hard hitting radiation. And one of our friends, like he's been battling cancer on and off for a really long time. And if you go into his house, it is like all trash food.
Yeah.
Like you need to like give your body what it needs, especially right now.
Well, what they don't tell you too is like, okay, you know what I hate? Like, do you want to know what I hate?
Yes, tell me.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to get so much flack for this. What I don't love is the culture, and a lot of dietitians do this. It's the culture that's like, there's no such thing as a bad food. There's only like how you consume it and your portions. And that's not true. Like I will go on a pedestal. Soda's bad for you. Like I'm sorry. Like I can't stand the culture that's like this. There's this very like, and again, it kind of goes into like the other categories of like fat shaming and some of that stuff. But there's this movement in the nutrition space and like the dietetic space more particularly. It's like there's no such thing as bad food. Well, yes, there is. It's again, the dose is the poison. You're very correct in that. But if you're looking at the majority of these products on the market, it's bad for you. Like the way that your body reacts physiologically speaking after you've consumed that food, it's not good. Now, again, don't want to like demonize like those people who are like, for example, trying to heal certain parts of themselves when it comes to food and eating disorders. We all eat bad food. We all eat bad food for us. Like that's, there's no question like that every so often I'll have a slice of pizza or I'll, go off and, have like a really big thing of ice cream, like whatever. But to say that there's no such thing as bad food is kind of harming in the long run, because when you're looking at like things like chronic illness and how you want to approach it, it's like it needs to be whole food. It needs to be a very specific way. And if you look at the way these foods impact you, for example, if you're a cancer patient and you're going and eating Cheez-Its and Cheetos and processed packaged foods that have zero water content.
What are you doing?
You're dehydrating yourself even more. You're going to proliferate disease just as fast, like, faster, because hydration is such a big piece. Actually, this is such an interesting subtopic. Like hydration is such an interesting concept in American culture because less than 19% of our water comes from our actual diet. Whereas if you look at Asian cultures, I think it's somewhere upwards of over 40+% of their water intake comes from their food.
Is that including like soup and broths?
Soups, broths, they are very focused on rices and like all of these things that hold a lot of water content. And then I think of like the American diet and like the number one thing I always think of is it's always missing water.
Yeah.
It's always missing water, hydration, beef jerky as a snack. Like, even though I love beef jerky, but like you think of all of it, it's all like dehydrated foods, and that's like what everybody's living on. So it's a very much so going to really sway the checks and balances in the body with minerals and all of that stuff.
So many people don't drink real water. I yell at my husband's parents all the time because we'll have like Deer Park downstairs. Like, can you just drink real water? Like, what you're doing right now is actually flushing out minerals from your system, and you're going to be more thirsty.
I know. It's
and
like
I have great water downstairs. Don't let this stuff fool you. I usually have like Mountain Valley, but they haven't delivered it. So we have Evian because I try not to do the plastic either. But we live in an imperfect world.
Right,
so here we are with my plastic water bottle.
It's like so funny. It's like kind of like the dogma, right? It's like, okay, we can talk about it all day. There's things that we're gonna like do because of the conveniences of life, and it would be more stressful for me to go drive out of my way 20 minutes to get X, Y, or Z. But ultimately, the water is a big one. Like,
start there and see how you feel. Did you see that? There's, what is her, like the glucose goddess or glucose queen
glucose
or something?
Goddess, yep.
So she was saying, and I am not a scientist, I am not a doctor, I'm a lay person that just has an interest in health and wellness.
Yeah.
But she was saying that there is this misinformation campaign when it comes to aspartame and these artificial sweeteners. And she said, obviously they're not great for you, that they show cancer in rats. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to show cancer in people. And then the amount that you would have to drink is pretty much impossible to consume. And that the actual real soda with real sugar is worse for you than the diet with the aspartame. So what is your opinion? Because that seems wrong. I don't know why. And again, I'm a lay person, so I could be the idiot in this situation, but it doesn't seem right. I'd rather have the real sugar.
I'd rather have the real sugar too. Now, I always take it back to this is a tough one because there's a guy named BioLane on Instagram. I don't know if you know him. He went in on her about this particular topic and was basically like, actually several topics, but he was counteracting, and I wish I had like what exactly was exchanged because it would really add to this conversation. But this is my thought about like nutrition as a whole. Aspartame turns into formaldehyde in the body. Like, it has a chemical process that it basically converts into said chemical, and from what I've read. And so there's that always lays in the back of my mind when I think about things like aspartame. Now, when it comes to real sugar, my whole process is the human body is designed to run on sugar, fats, and protein. That's mic drop. That's like what we run on. So if I'm having excess sugar day in and day out, yes, that will cause a metabolic issue long term. But if I am a person who rarely picks up a Coke, and
like once a year,
picking up a
once
Coke,
a month,
and I'm looking at a Diet Coke versus a regular Coke, you bet your butt I am freaking picking up. I was gonna say, can I swear?
Yeah. And anything is
you bet your ass I'm picking up the like Diet Coke, honestly. So, you bet your ass I'm picking up the regular Coke.
Yeah.
So I think of like aspartame, and I just can't wrap my head around the chemical exchange that occurs. And my dad is like an addict for Diet Coke. So
I hear that too. It's like the people that get on Diet Coke, it is like it's real addiction.
And they will defend it like it is their like life on the line. Like, I have gotten into so many arguments with people who are addicted to Diet Coke, and I'm like, dude, we're just having a conversation about a food that I don't really think is that good for you. And they're like, well, the studies say, and I'm like, well, who's the studies funded? Yeah. Who are the studies funded by? Like, is it the Food and Beverage, like, is it a beverage association of sorts? Like, who is it? So yeah, I personally would be picking up the regular Coke.
I would too. Okay, I'm glad.
I would probably be eating a steak with it to try to like maybe blunt my insulin response. Like, but I cannot get with the aspartame crowd. Like, I can't.
No, it just seems like a bad idea. And I mean, it's totally anecdotal, but I was so my mom was a bodybuilder growing up. So people automatically assume then that meant that she had a great relationship with food and that she was super healthy and knew nutrition. Like, it's usually the opposite if you run in that crowd, because you have, especially as a woman, to get that lean, you're not necessarily making healthy decisions. So I grew up thinking everything had to be light, fat-free, diet this, diet that. And I was on this major health kick. I was dating like this gym bro and everything.
We've all gone through that phase.
Everyone's gone through the gym bro
I literally had that gym bro phase where I was like dating a guy with a gym, and I was like, now I look back.
It was like your whole personality.
It was my whole personality. It was a CrossFit gym, so it really was my whole personality. I was like, ew.
Yeah,
I'm like, ooh.
I guess it builds character. Dating a guy like that builds character
in more ways than one.
I'm a stronger woman for it. But like everything was processed, and I looked great on the outside. I was lean, and then one day I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. Fatigue. And I looked pregnant. Like, my stomach was so swollen, and I went probably a year before they figured out what it was, and then I had like the massive onset of endometriosis, and then PCOS, and then a couple years later Graves' disease. And
oh wow.
Yeah, and I know my diet. Like, what maybe didn't cause it. Right. Might have. Maybe. We don't know. But it definitely kind of like turned it on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, it really just takes a few environmental like stressors to hit a boiling point, I like to call it, or it's like a threshold that then just like sends you over the edge. And that's like it really, like, it's a compounding effect because it's not like just the polyfluoroalkyl substances in your water is going to like send you over the edge one day. It's like, no, it's like 30 different things that ended up combining in a perfect storm. And now we're here, like, having, these issues with autoimmune, and it's so many people that like have that similar story.
Yeah, way too many. Like, like everyone knows at least probably 2 people that have an autoimmune condition. Like, that's not normal. And then you have to look at when did it onset, and then look at your habits that were forming around then, or your stressors, because usually they'll say, the gene might be there. We don't really know with autoimmune, but like something kind of puts it into gear.
I have gotten really into this particular form of like medicine. It's called German New Medicine. At some point you're gonna have to look it up, because
I'm gonna write it down.
Yeah, you need to look it up because it's very fascinating. It's German New Medicine, or Germanic New Medicine, and it's all about conflict resolution. So if you've heard of the book The Body Keeps Score, it's really based on this German doctor created it, Hammer, I think his name was. He's brilliant. Like, if you actually get into and I am by no means an expert to talk about it, but if you get into the weeds on it, it is exceptionally fascinating on how the body works and how like some things can trigger one person versus some things like don't affect that person. And it kind of takes I won't do it justice like explaining it, so you'll just have to go down the rabbit trail, but it's all about conflict resolution in the body and traumas that can get like exacerbated by environmental environmental stressors and triggers. And it's so fascinating. I've gone down a rabbit hole, like people, for example, who struggle with acne. There was at some point in time something called an attack conflict, and it felt like they were verbally getting attacked, or maybe they like had like some sort of falling out, and they felt like they were literally getting attacked, and the body ended up creating an epidermal layer, an extra epidermal layer where their skin cells don't shed as fast, right? And then they start dealing with something like acne, and it's like the attack response, conflict resolution. If your body doesn't actually identify the trigger, different things may trigger it, and you end up with this like extra epidermal layer, and then you start getting acne, and it's literally a defense mechanism that your body builds. And it's the same thing with like things like weight gain, and it goes through all of these different like types. A sneeze, like
what's
crazy.
a sneeze?
A sneeze is like it's like a conflict that was resolved. It's like I'm gonna butcher it because I'm like not an expert in it, but a sneeze is like something like triggered you, like a past memory or something, and you had like a sneeze effect, and it's like a conflict resolution that the body's trying to wipe clean that memory or something like that.
Weird.
I don't know. And you can resolve conflicts for other people around you. So like things like yawning, it's like it kind of goes around, and there's all these like crazy explanations. Anyway, go down that rabbit hole. It's very like, that's very one-off, but you have to look into it. It's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess this is a good transition, because we were talking about trauma and how like the body keeps a score, and these ideas that early experiences can have a long-lasting effect on your psyche and your body.
Yeah.
And some people think it's woo-woo, but there's enough anecdotal evidence out there that it kind of makes sense. And they have done studies, with like, and my audience has heard this, but maybe someone hasn't. It's when they did the study with the rats or the mice, and to the mother they would introduce an electric shock and then a cherry blossom scent, so they associated the pain with the cherry blossom. So the pups that came out when they would smell cherry blossoms had a reaction, like they were anticipating pain. So that through epigenetics, we know it works there. So it's not crazy, and it's not as woo as it kind of sounds. No. I listened to your recent episode on circumcision, and I was really excited that you were talking about it, because I think that for a long time, most people thought it's just something that you do, right? It's no second thought to it.
Oh my gosh. It's like an epidemic in the US. It just became like the thing.
It's just the thing. And then we are taught to shame people that are intact. Yeah. And that's gross. Ew. Why didn't you do that? But then you realize that a third of the world is cut. The rest is not. So it's like actually not normal.
No. And I learned that. Well, okay, right? Talking about religion, it is the oldest surgery in the world, right? Like, that is what circumcision is. It's like one of the oldest surgeries in history. And it's so interesting because I started dating my husband. I started making friends from other countries. I realized very quickly that the US was a very small fraction of what is actually happening in the world, and that majority of countries, like most Europe, most like of South America, they're all uncircumcised and have zero problems with it. And also, when I met these people, would make jokes about how every like US kid, like it was like the US is like, that's the thing. And they were like, it's not really one way or another. I mean, if you're religious about it, like, and you want to do it, that's fine. But like, it's really just like driven by insurance.
You're more accepting than I am with that. So I got myself into a rabbit hole, and I actually learned a lot from your podcast that I didn't find in my own research, but I always thought that it was to keep it clean and to help with infections later and STDs. And I was listening to this podcast. It was Alex Clark's Spillover, and she had this guy on. Did you listen to that one?
Yes.
So he was saying, so to circle back to trauma, there's a conversation around something as simple as sleep training, and that will get people up in arms. Like, that is going to ruin your child into adulthood. So if something is non-violent as that, and then you compare circumcision, which is no anesthesia. It's not a very quick procedure.
No.
There's a good amount that do have complications after. This
like
guy
25% have complications
which
with their
most
urethra.
mothers would have no idea.
Yeah, no, it's because it's like a non-informed consent.
Not informed consent. When do we ever get informed consent? And really,
not often,
especially as a woman going through like pregnancy, you rarely get it.
No.
But he was saying that when a boy gets circumcised, it's his first dissociative experience, because as a baby, you can't move, you can't talk, you can't protest, so you have to dissociate from your body to escape the pain, because there is an immense amount of pain, and that is actually one of the most traumatic things that we can do, and it leads to dysfunction sexually and like the relationship that we have with sex. And then in this episode, I learned that it really started getting pushed during the Victorian era, because they thought that masturbation and sex were the reason to blame for everything.
Right.
Like it would make you go blind. It was the reason that you were sick. It was the reason that society was falling apart. So they said, if we desensitize this part of the male body, and they even were doing it to some females, that will cure everything. And the guy in the podcast is like, obviously it worked. Dun.
Right. My conclusions after learning everything that I had about circumcision was that it was exploitation of the child. Like, and that sounds like, I think that's like, people will get up in arms about that, but like, that's what I came to like, it is exploitation.
Is it genital mutilation? Like, why is it for a girl and not a boy? So when people
Right.
are like, okay, well, if it's for religion, well, they're Muslims. There are plenty of them that still do female genital mutilation, and that's part of their culture and part of their religion. So do we say that that's acceptable because it's part of their? And I say no, adamantly. I say no. And
I would stand on that hill.
Right, and it's
like. No.
Yes, like that is more extreme than a circumcision, but it's adjacent.
It's okay, and this is where I got pissed. I was like, I was reading this, and okay, so first of all, the neonatal fibroblasts, which are what they harvest, the stem cell cultures, right? They go for $400 a milliliter. $400 a milliliter. There's multiple companies. I'm pretty sure they're all based in the U.S. that are their stem cell like research companies, right? Mm-hmm. They're biomedical science companies, and they're worth billions. Mm-hmm. And it's like a whole underground industry because, so like the parents are thinking that this is medical waste. Like, oh, my child is getting this, it's medical waste. Like the placenta, we know that placentas are worth crazy amounts of money, like $50,000 plus, something like that. And like the parents go in thinking like, oh, this is medical waste. Aside from the procedure in and of itself is like, in my opinion now, knowing what I know, I'm like, it's horrifying. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, this is medical waste that then gets sold to biomedical companies, to cosmetic companies. Mm-hmm. And then you have crazy celebrities like Oprah Winfrey, I'm pretty sure was one of them.
It's in her favorite cream.
And Sandra Bullock. Yeah, that came out like Sandra Bullock was like, she gets the penis facial with like literally neonatal fibroblast stem cells from foreskin of children. I was like, you want me to get riled up about something? I will literally fight like on that topic because I'm like, these celebrities are like, it's got to be exploitation. Like there's the only way that I just like think of it is like that is exploitation. Mm-hmm. And like they're using it for their beauty and their youth, and there's a lot of other things I'm sure they also use that we could get into, but like that to me is so wrong in so many levels that like these biomedical companies are profiting exceptionally insane amounts, and then the clinics themselves are profiting because they're selling the waste, the quote unquote waste. And I'm sure it's in the fine print somewhere that the parents will never know that this is actually what's happening on the back end. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, it's insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was looking it up for cosmetics, I was like, wait, we're actually putting them in cosmetics. I thought that was like a future thing. We're not doing it yet, or maybe it's not passed. No, so it's like, for hair growth stimulation. It's in hydrofacials, which is crazy because I used to get those all the time. So I guess I've done them without knowing. Skin Medica, this is on Wikipedia, so it must be true. But yeah, I had no idea. And then there are like the cases where you're using them for skin grafts and burn victims and diabetes.
And it's like stem cells, like they have their place, right? Like stem cell research is incredible. Like there are people who absolutely need it. Like you said, skin grafts, like tissue repair, like that sort of thing. But then there's like a fine line. There's there's places that you can get stem cells without mutilating.
Also, should like the parents be and like the mom be like compensated if they're gonna sell your placenta for $50,000? Like, shouldn't you get something for that?
They literally deem it as biomedical waste in the paperwork.
Well, I saved mine for the cord blood thing, so mine's somewhere in a freezer in Arizona.
Well, in traditional Chinese medicine, a lot of times, like, well, you look at like animals, they all eat their placenta. Like a lot of them eat their placenta postpartum. But like in traditional Chinese medicine, that's such a thing to balance hormones postpartum. Is like taking small cubes of your placenta in like again, it can really be off-putting to some people because they're like, why are you like eating an organ that was technically excreted by the body? But it's like, okay, well, I always say look at nature and look at other cultures, because usually Western like society is kind of a little bit, you know, off on some of the approaches to things. But in traditional Chinese medicine, it is a way that women are literally able to single-handedly sometimes really help their hormones balance. And again, people will argue it's, oh, is it placebo effect? Oh, is it real? Mm-hmm. But I can firsthand say that I felt an extreme difference.
So you
versus
dried
taking
yours?
I did it like a regular organ, kind of like I would do beef liver, like frozen, and put it in smoothies.
Oh, wow.
And I sound crazy when people are like, wow, really? But I would tell the days that I could do it, like I had it versus the days I didn't, and I would feel a massive difference, like hormonally, because your placenta was responsible for creating all the hormones in that second, third phase of pregnancy. Like it took over at a certain point, I think 20 weeks, and it was doing all the hormone production. Like it was doing a lot of work. And so then your body just goes, and it's really hard to come to terms with that when you're in that postpartum phase. And so, yeah, in TCM, it's a very like specific practice that they do.
Oh, that's so interesting. See, when I was trying to decide to do it or not to do it, I couldn't find enough to sway me either way. So I was like, I'm just not going to do it. I don't know who I was following, but they were saying that like there can be a buildup of toxins, and this is
right.
So if you aren't being intentional enough with your diet, then it's accumulating in the organ, and then it's counterproductive to healing. And I was like, I don't know what's happening, so I'm just gonna take my vitamins. So speaking of supplementing postpartum, I was watching the Scary Brecca episode, and he was saying that there's something with like the methylation process with folic acid, and it can actually cause a ton of anxiety in women. And what do we get put on while we're pregnant and
folic
postpartum?
acid.
Right.
So the MTHFR gene.
So how significant is that effect on most women, would you say? Like, is it?
It depends on your genetic predisposition, right? So folic acid is, I would dare say, detrimental if you have the MTHFR gene. Sometimes you can, I would say, like, a lot of people know naturally if they carry that gene, because sometimes in blood work and a lot of different things, a lot of times women or men will get notified that they have that gene. It's problems with something called methylation. And that's, again, tied back to the liver and how the liver processes specific things. Liver methylation is essentially like a form of detoxification and metabolism that people with this disposition are unable to do really well. And again, I'm not an expert on it, so I just kind of know the groundwork, and that folate is a much more bioavailable version of the B vitamins versus folic acid is a precursor. A lot of times it's the synthetic version of what folate actually is, and folic acid tends to cause issues with people who cannot methylate properly, which in turn would make sense for things like anxiety and some of those symptoms. And that's what they put you on as a prenatal. And there's only a handful of prenatal supplements that'll actually put you on the real folate. Like that's a whole nother rabbit trail on why they do that. But it's
What's
really
the
kind of
conspiracy theory?
I don't really know why I don't understand why they put women on folic acid.
Because
I really
you just
don't.
eat, like, if you're eating eggs and fish,
If you're eating eggs, fish, red meat, beef liver, you're getting these
fine, right?
B vitamins, right? You're getting, and again, it's really important for the neural tube development in babies, in the fetus, especially in the first, I think it's like 10 weeks. It's really important. So again, when you're taking prenatal, it's most important like during the first part of the pregnancy, and it's even more important if you're actually taking folate. And again, I think it just goes back down to like bioavailability. Maybe in this industry, they're looking at a cheap way of doing it. They're not necessarily turning to like whole food sources. I think we also have a big plant-based propaganda thing happening. And I think there's just denial that sometimes like animal-based products are like literally the way to like enriching your health in every aspect, and especially during pregnancy. If you're not eating your weight in grams of protein daily, then you really need to try to focus on that. Like, I don't know, it's there's a lot there. I don't really understand a lot of the recommendations and why they push that. I just know it's not technically correct from all the stuff that I've slowly kind of learned. So
yeah, I switched. I listened to that episode, and my postpartum journey with my second was wildly different than my
Really?
first. My first one, I feel like I went to sleep and I woke up and my body was back. I didn't have to do anything.
That's amazing.
It was crazy. My second one, it just wasn't going anywhere. And I kept telling my doctors, like, I feel terrible. I am exhausted no matter how much sleep I get. The weight is not coming off. And they look at that like a vanity thing. They're like, oh,
They're
well,
like,
just wait. I'm like, no, like that is a
No.
sign of something. Like it's
thyroid, yeah.
Right. And that's what I kept saying. Well, your thyroid's supposed to be out of whack because you just had a baby. And I'm like, well, this didn't happen the first time. And they're like, well, every pregnancy is different. I'm like, I'm telling you, there's something wrong. So I
God.
had Graves' disease, I guess it's maybe a forever thing, but I'm like, I'm just going to go off my medicine.
Right.
And they told me not to. They're like, your levels are fine. I'm like, they're not fine. Look at me. Like I'm giving you all of the signs of like low thyroid, and they just wouldn't. So I went off my medicine against their advice. I hired a private practice doctor. I started working with Merrick Health, and so they were monitoring everything. Everything started to level out. I stopped taking my traditional postpartum like prenatal
supplement.
and then I took something, I think it's Thorne, and they have like
Thorne
the
is
real
great.
version, and my brain fog lifted, the weight started coming off. I
Insane.
felt like I was like taken out of this cloud. I wouldn't say it was postpartum depression because it wasn't that bad, but it definitely wasn't my normal baseline.
You can tell. Like a woman's intuition, whether it's for her babies or it's for herself, she knows what she's talking about. And I hate the gaslighting that these doctors do. But then I always have to remind myself, and like the people that I'm here and friends with, their parents are doctors, and I love how even keeled they are because they're in research, and one of them actually halts drugs like from getting onto the marketplace. But what like is so interesting is like that said is like doctors are taught to practice medicine. Literally, the word medicine. They're taught to practice medicine. They're not taught to look for root cause. And even if they know that like majority of women who are coming into the postpartum era after having a baby are like hypothyroid, they just deem that as part of the process and are in like, it feels like so many of them are just incapable of seeing like, okay, well, what's the root cause? And like, is there a way to solve this, or is it going to solve it on its own? Or, oh, are we just going to push them onto Synthroid or another thyroid medicine down the road? It's so crazy that this is the reality of our profit medical model. Like, it's all for profit. And it's
And they say
medicine.
you're supposed to feel that way. You're supposed to feel like
no,
jug.
you're not.
No, you're not.
No, you're not. In traditional Chinese medicine, there's the 40 days that's practiced. And the 40 days is a place where the mama does not go really out of the house. She wears warm wool socks. She's taken cared for by usually 1 to 2 extra people in the house, whether it's a grandma, a mom, whatever. The husband as well. She's got probably meals prepared for her. She's eating a lot of like red medjool dates. She's lots of broths, things that are warming to the womb. And they say in traditional Chinese medicine that the mother who practices the 40 days after, she should come out feeling better than she did before she got pregnant.
Whoa.
So that is the opposite in philosophy, that you have like, she should come out nourished and glowing after the 40 days of postpartum versus, oh, you're working 9 to 5, you have 10 weeks of maternity leave, figure out how to manage your baby and manage everything else while having little to no help, and a husband that's also working nonstop. Yeah, you're just gonna have to figure it out. We'll prescribe you something. How's your anxiety? Oh, you should probably get that like
Yeah, let's
checked.
just throw you on Lexapro. You'll be fine.
I can't believe like you hear these stories and you like want to laugh because you're like, this is so absurd. It's insane. And it's normal here. And it's the opposite in other places in the world. I mean, look at how many other countries have 6+ months, 8 months of maternity leave. Like here, you are lucky. Like most women are lucky if they get 10 weeks.
And then they don't even take it if they have it.
Yeah,
because they feel
because they're
guilty.
scared that they're gonna lose their job. It's insane. I will fight to the death on like this topic because it boils my blood, because then you get because hypothyroidism is the inability of, it's like it stems from like in trauma, it's like not being enough. Like if you look at like the TCM version, I think German New Medicine there may be crossovers in this, and I don't know exactly, and I don't want to butcher it, but it's the ability to not be like, feel like you're speaking your truth and not feel like enough, and that you're kind of chasing the rat race as a mother and or just as a woman. And so the thyroid is in the throat. The throat chakra is associated with it, and it's got this connection of the inability to basically be saying, thinking, doing what you feel like you need to do and that you can't keep up or you can't catch up. And it's very like there's a very strong like energetic sense to the condition. So I've had some hypothyroid activity postpartum a little bit myself.
Really?
I've been trying to have.
From the outside in, I was like seeing all the stuff you were eating, and I'm like, oh, that's amazing.
Right.
And then I see you in a bikini in Spain, and I'm like, good God, she's not human.
No, but you know what's interesting too is the hypothyroidism shows through more than just the weight. Hypothyroidism is a very stealthy condition because it starts out with like cold hands and cold feet. Some women, it will show through as losing a lot of hair, but maybe their weight goes back to normal. Some women, it's the weight in certain regions just doesn't fall off. Some women, it's this chronic lethargy, but then like maybe they're also skinny. So it's like this mirage. It's like this very like stealthy thing because all these women experience it super differently. And you'll just like feel in your body, like you'll feel it in your gut, you'll feel it, and you'll just be like, things are slow. Like things aren't moving the way that they normally do, or I'm losing like a little bit of hair right now. Like that's one of the things that I've like noticed about myself is like, oh, I'm losing a little bit of hair and I'm kind of feeling cold hands, cold feet a good amount. And that was how it started to kind of like show forth for me, where I wasn't really wanting to work out. I was kind of just like slow, like, oh, okay, this is the first signs of thyroid. I need to do selenium. I need to like try to eat like a lot of selenium and a good amount of iodine. Well, personally for me, like that's like I crave seaweed and like salty things, and then like and I'm starting to kind of feel a little bit better, but definitely noticed it. And stress, of course, exacerbates it like a lot. And
then how do you do that when you're not sleeping, right?
Right.
Yeah.
How do you get over that when you're not sleeping? That's a great question.
Yeah.
You honestly, co-sleeping has been my answer.
I committed to that with my first one. I was so convinced I was going to kill him, and this is all because everyone tells you to do it. Like, so he did it.
Everybody was telling me that too. They're like, you're gonna like regret this, like. And then I was like, I had the maternal instincts that kick in overnight.
At night, with my second,
I'm literally like nipple.
Yep. And you just don't move. And he's exactly where he is when I went to bed. Obviously, like you make sure the blankets are where they need to be, all that good stuff. But with my second, we co-slept till he was 5 months. Yeah. And it was amazing.
And
I got
you
sleep.
Yeah. You literally sleep. Like people don't tell you. Like that is the hack. Like, okay, they're like, yeah, sleepless night. No, you co-sleep and you'll literally sleep. Or like just get the extension bassinet for the bed and it's perfectly safe. Like you get the extension bassinet and you actually sleep at night. And nobody tells you that.
Yep.
And again, I talk about other cultures.
It's normal.
It's so normally practiced in all the other cultures around the world. And then you come here and it's like, oh, well, fear of this, of that. And there are instances when you maybe shouldn't co-sleep if you're like a heavy sleeper, if you're a smoker, like those types of things, drinking. Like there are instances, but if you're a healthy mama who has like good instincts and the dad, like there's very specific ways to do it like very safely. And
see, I wouldn't trust my husband, and I think he would say he doesn't trust himself either. So he slept in the guest room, and then it was just me and the baby for a while.
I always did it on the opposite side of Rodrigo first. Now Luca is like big enough where Rodrigo like totally knows he's in bed too. He like Luca like sometimes will crawl on him at night, like in the middle of the night. We're like, Luca, go back to sleep. And so like we've gotten used to it, but at first it was the same way where it was like husbands aren't as like aware, so either have him on the other side with the bassinet, and then like if he gets big enough and old enough, then you can kind of like, okay, now we're back all together.
Yeah, you're out of like the scary territory.
Oh my gosh, when they're so little, like that.
It's like a baby bird.
It is, and you're just like, oh yeah, but it's a labor of love, man. Between that and breastfeeding,
I'm still going. I'm trying to cut my 17-month-old. He will rip my shirt off in public if he has to. Like he is like, we're not stopping it. I'm like, well, when can we? Because
wondering if Luca is going to be
ready. I'm so ready.
It's like they're like child-led weaning. I'm like, well, some of these kids probably wouldn't wean until they're 4 years old.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be my youngest. My oldest was done around 14 months. He just
was
didn't
like,
care.
yeah, I'm done.
Over it. And then this one is like violent about it. You like pin me down.
My child is an aggressive eater. I had to learn that. I was like, Luca got teeth at 3 months. He has 6 teeth by 7 months, and I was like dying because I'm like, he's aggressive and like he's got chompers on him. Like he will bite me. And then when I tell him no, he like laughs.
Mine yells.
He'll
yell at me.
I'm like, wait.
It's like, no. What do you mean no? Not happening. So those are mine.
Yeah,
so.
You're borrowing these.
Oh my
That's what my
gosh.
husband always tells him. He's like, you're borrowing these, little guy. Like, just remember.
He's like, that's what you think,
It's not
Papa.
forever.
That's what you think. Oh my gosh. So speaking of numbers and like misconceptions around babies, childbirth, all of that, I saw that you did a home birth.
Oof. Yeah, it was controversial one too.
It always is. It always is. But yours was particular because he was breech, right?
He was breech.
So in North Carolina, that's not legal. They would make like a midwife would lose her ability.
License.
Yeah, she would have to.
It's like that in pretty much all the states. Actually.
Oh, I didn't know
in
that.
Most states.
So I guess starting there, why is it illegal to do a breech baby?
Okay, so breech became, what's crazy is my grandmother had my dad breech vaginally, which is pretty, again, it was more common back then than it is now, still pretty uncommon. Only 3 to 4% of all births ever actually end up with the baby coming out breech, because most of the time the babies will flip during labor and they'll come out head first. So it's a very, very like rare occurrence per se. But what I like is there's this organization called Breech Without Borders, and they teach, like, they're starting to teach physicians and a lot of midwives like the proper practices of natural breech delivery. So in 2001, the hospital, I would say like maybe the medical curriculum basically stopped teaching vaginal breech, and it only became C-section. And prior to a C-section, most mothers would be given the option to do an ECV, which is an external cephalic version. So that was pretty much gold standard 2001 on. If you ask a medical resident in like school today, they have never seen a vaginal breech delivery most times. And if they have a vaginal breech delivery by some very off chance in the hospital, they will call all of the doctors and all of the residents in to watch. In fact, the last woman that I think I had talked with had a breech birth kind of unexpected in the hospital, and they had 11 doctors and medical residents watching the birth.
Whoa.
That's how like taboo it is.
So why? Like, what is the foundation of this fear and concern?
It honestly came from a study that was done and I can't remember the exact study, but they later kind of redacted that the study wasn't entirely correct and didn't actually portray like what the real statistics of a breech birth were. And so this breech birth like basically showed like poorer outcomes versus doing it C-section. But the way that the trial or like the way that the study was set up, it didn't really grasp long-term effects on like cesareans versus like vaginal. It missed a lot of things. And like I said, I don't have the study like up, and I wish I did, but it was all based on this one study. And then later on they were like, well, this study was actually not even the most conclusive study. Like there's still more that could have been unpacked here. And so a lot of like doctors like raised red flags. But by that point, the medical curriculum based on the study had already changed. So 2001, they stopped doing it. Only C-sections are allowed with the option of like an ECV offered.
What's an ECV?
Prior to an external cephalic version. And that is when they manually turn the baby, and it can be very traumatic. Some women end up going into labor because of it, and sometimes they'll even get epidurals while they're doing it.
Yeah, I've heard of
So
those.
it's pretty intense. It can be. Now, some midwives are trained to do it in a like manually in a very like gentle way. So some midwives do have that training and are actually able to do it in a way that is not necessarily considered invasive. And sometimes the baby takes it, or sometimes you'll go in for an ECV and the baby will flip right back. So I was at a birth center. I was 36 weeks pregnant, and homeboy was still breech. And I was like, oh boy. And they dropped me because the birth centers are not allowed to legally deliver breech, because since 2001, basically it stopped becoming a thing. and C-sections were the way to go. So they offered, like, they're like, hey, like, there's only 2 doctors that we know in the area that would potentially let you trial vaginal breech. But even still, they still have pretty, like, high rates of C-sections. They still intervene here and there. Or you can also schedule an ECV. So I was left with, like, basically little to no options. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. I know that I can deliver this baby, like, vaginally. And my really good friend had also had a breech birth, home birth.
Wow.
And I called her up and I was like, hey, like, can you talk to me about, like, what happened? Like, give me what, like, happened. She's like, oh, well, one, I had, like, this one special midwife from Tennessee, and she's very highly trained, and she teaches other people, like, a lot of, like, breech. And why breech is so dangerous, quote unquote, like, getting back to your question, is because there is this risk of the neck.
Okay.
So the difference between a baby that's coming out head first is that the head and the neck are born first, versus a baby that's coming out breech. A lot of times it gets to the neck and it's hanging. And if anybody tries to get the rest of the head, neck out and try to maneuver the baby, they can break the neck.
Whoa. Okay.
So it sounds, and again, sounds a lot scarier than it actually is, because if you learn more and more about breech, you realize that in some ways breech birth is actually easier, especially if you're doing it in a pool, which is what I did. So breech birth is just a variation of normal, and that's what Breech Without Borders, the organization, teaches. And now they're teaching a lot of physicians and midwives and stuff how to do it properly, and it's pretty international. So it's gained a lot of traction, and there's more people that are willing to hear, but it's still very, very taboo. The rule with a breech baby is you never touch the breech baby when it is coming out. As a midwife, you let it come out its own.
Okay.
You let it hang. Basically, like, it comes out feet first. You don't do interventions to get it out. And if you
can they hold you open while it's happening?
they can help hold you open. Yeah, exactly. There's certain things that aren't as much of a concern. Now, there's, like, a couple of different types of breech positions that are trickier than others, right? But Luca came out textbook breech, which is his butt rumped first and then his feet came out, and then the rest of him, like, kind of came out after. And like I said, he was in a pool, so it was a very smooth process, and nobody touched him.
It takes the gravity away a little bit.
Basically, it just takes the gravity away. He was kind of just, like, floating. He was floating for a second, and then he came out. And you don't have to worry about things like shoulder dystocia and, like, some of the other things
in the water
that you might have to worry about. Yeah, that you might have to worry about with, like, head down babies, where the positioning, sometimes the shoulders come out one way.
That's how my second came out.
Yeah, exactly.
Shoulder first, and they're like,
ouch.
I'm like, oh my God.
Right. Like, there's, and when the, what is it, shoulder, I can't remember, but, like, when it gets stuck, when it gets stuck, like, you don't necessarily have some of those fears. But, like, again, everybody's different, and sometimes you'll tear more with breech. Luckily, I didn't have that experience, but, like, my friend did have a little bit more of a tougher breech birth, you would say. But again, if you've got people that are trained and know exactly, like, how it's supposed to go and, like, the protocol, that it's like, okay, well, hey. And a lot of times, sometimes in home births, you won't even know. Like, sometimes the moms will go in, they don't even know the baby's breech, and all of a sudden the midwives are surprised. They don't have time to get to a hospital, so they have to know what to do sometimes. And they have to be able to act fast and be like, okay, we're not touching it. It's a hands-off delivery, essentially. And you just kind of let your body
do its thing.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah. You're a brave woman. It's with my first, I wanted to do it super natural as possible. We live in an area where we have one of the only, they call them baby friendly hospitals. So their protocol is it's like as natural as you can get without going to, like, a birthing center.
That's what my friend is doing. Yeah. She's like going to, like, a wing of the hospital that's like basically like a natural delivery wing, and it's super holistic. They have midwives on staff. They'll help you with yoga positions. They've got the balls. They do like trigger point while you're in labor. It's really, really amazing. So it's like, I'll do that because it's super low intervention if you want it to be. Right.
I had a really difficult birth. Like, I was laboring for like 2 days. not really progressing. They thought it was going to be a C-section last minute, and finally I started to push.
Like, ready, let's go.
But he came out with a nuchal cord, so he had an APGAR of 0, so basically a stillbirth. They rushed him to a cart, had to take him to the NICU. They said, we don't know what's going to happen. They put him into hypothermic coma for 3 days. No one could touch him. And I didn't know if I was going to leave with a baby. So for me, it was almost as bad as a birth story could be.
Oh my God.
And they're telling me, thank God he was in the hospital, which I believe that. However, when she gave me the statistics of how many babies end up in NICU at the hospital, I had no idea how common it was. So she was telling me, at least at this hospital, or maybe it was in general, it was 1 in 10 end up in NICU. And I'm like, that seems like a lot of babies.
Yeah.
And I know that birth has historically been kind of dangerous for mom and baby. And then we learned to wash our hands. That made a significant difference.
Right.
So I was wondering, like, what is the difference between like home births / birthing centers and their rates of intervention and NICU stays versus hospitals? And I was like, well, surely the birthing centers are going to be worse, and surely home births were going to be worse. And I looked, and then the study was like, no, not true at all. So the home births that were planned, it was like 0.57 ended up having like some complications.
Yep.
And then let me see if I can find the hospital. But I was so surprised.
Yeah.
Where is it?
There is some really interesting data.
Oh, 0.3% for home births, and then 0.57. So almost double.
Yeah. It's interesting because some of the studies that get referenced that kind of like demonize home births, they also include unplanned home births, which can be really misleading, because if you go in prematurely into labor, the chances of complications are radically different than if you go in at full term into labor, right?
Yeah.
So I think like whenever I used to look at studies of home births versus like birth centers / hospital settings, I think like I remember like there was a gal that I was listening to pretty heavily, and she was like, the statistics are fairly skewed because they clump in unexpected and premature births in that equation. And there's a lot that can happen and can go wrong in those circumstances. But when you look at home birth versus birthing centers, this was something that was very interesting for me. If you look at a lot of times like hospital births versus home births, I don't want to like say this without having the data to back it up, but a lot of times you will hear women explaining much longer labors. And there's a reason for that, because the cervix has a very, very strong protective mechanism, and it's mirrored in primal settings in animals. If the mother does not feel comfortable giving birth in the setting she is in, her cervix will close again. And when you're in the process of laboring at home, and then you get transferred, you go into a car and transferred to go to the hospital, some women will be literally 6 centimeters dilated when they're at home. They will arrive to the hospital and they will be back to 3 centimeters. And they'll be like, I don't understand what happened. My midwife literally showed that I was dilated 6 centimeters, that I was getting closer. And by the time I got to the hospital, I was back down to half of that. So how does that come into play? And so the biggest thing that I've kind of heard a lot of times, and this is not to say like home births are better than birth centers. For me, like it was absolutely my preference, because I have a very strong disinclination, like an inclination to stay away from hospital settings. But it's just that the primal instincts tend to take over in the mother, and the labors end up getting extended because of the transfer of early labor to the hospital setting, to an unfamiliar area where you not necessarily know everybody as well. You're in an unfamiliar room, you're in unfamiliar settings, and the body knows that. It's so smart, it's so intelligent, so it closes the cervix up. So then you get into 12, 24 hours into labor, right? And the hospital's like, wow, you're not progressing. What do? They give you an induction most of the time, right? You hit with a little Pitocin, sometimes an epidural, just depending on if you want to try to weather those contractions or not. And because of that, the contractions get far stronger at a much quicker rate than they would ever naturally in labor. And we know that about Pitocin. It very much so has a strong effect on both the female body and the fetuses.
The baby,
on the baby's body. So we know that the second we start looking at inductions, we're going to get epidural. Epidural might relax the mom too much. We're in for another round of Pitocin. All of a sudden, we're in really high dosing Pitocin. We've lost the fetal tones. This is a common, you'll hear this story a lot.
This happened with both mine.
We've lost the fetal tones. We can't hear the baby's heart rate. Again, too much Pitocin has been administered at this point for it to be completely unnatural. Mom is going into potentially shock sometimes. Some women will have like pretty strong reactions. Their eyes may roll to the back of their heads. They've lost the fetal tones and they'll rush them for an emergency C-section a lot of times when this happens. And this is the same like story you hear a lot of times at hospitals, even with the most natural, like even in the most natural settings or even in the birth center, like, because they only allow you to be in labor a certain amount of time without inducing. They put parameters, right? But labor and delivery, like the birth of a baby, doesn't have a timeline. Like they're coming when they're coming, and you know you have to like kind of rest assured knowing that. But like the hospitals don't give that time because it's money. So having a natural long birth is not always ideal, and so you get into this power play of for-profit medical system meets mom who's taking too long to labor, meets interventions, and all of a sudden we're getting charged $6,000 to $10,000 for the C-section that was unexpected. And it's pretty alarming how often that happens. In a home birth setting, you don't have those interventions taking place. And you don't have those interventions taking place. You also don't have them as sometimes like you don't have them as crutches. And I would say like it can be really scary, but also like it requires full surrender because your body, you're like, oh, my body literally knows how to do this. We were born to do this. Like we were physiologically designed to do this. And I just have to like trust that my body knows what it's doing and that I'm not going to stall the process. And I think that that's what a lot of times where interventions come in because the birth process stalls when we get into unfamiliar settings. And I think that's why we see a lot of the interventions that end up occurring. Just because that, we intercede in the natural process of birth a lot. But at the same time, you do like there's always risk carried one way or another, right? And that's what you learned is like there's always risk one way or another, and it's like how do you weigh the risk reward?
And so much of it's uncertain. It's like I wish that I felt safe to do it at home because there is a question mark in my head that so my first one was taking so long that they were like, okay, well, we're going to break your water. So that was intervention 1. And then it can only be broken for so long. So then they're like, okay, well, you're not progressing. We'll just give you some Pitocin. And at this point, like it was my first one. So like, I'm going to do this thing without an epidural, even with the Pitocin. I got this. So I get the Pitocin and they start jacking that up. And I was doing like, if by no means was a cakewalk, but I was managing my pain. I was going in the shower. I had my doula rubbing my back. I would go in the bath. Like I was moving, walking, squatting, like all the things. So I was like working through the pain. And then I start getting the Pitocin, and then it's like, it was a psychedelic experience for me. Oh my God. I was like rolling. So it's like I would get a contraction that I felt was going to break every bone in my body. So I'd be alert. And the minute it stopped, I'd almost like collapse into this. I don't know where I went.
I've heard this experience with Pitocin, which is so interesting because it's so different from the experiences I had with my contractions. And again, everybody's contractions are very different. But the way that I hear like people describe Pitocin is exactly what you said. It is so intense to where you just like basically lose all consciousness after the contraction's done. Yeah.
So it's like in and out of awareness. And then eventually I said, I'm like, I need an epidural. This is unnatural. I can't do it.
Yeah.
And then obviously everything transpired with him. My second one, I don't know why he didn't want to come out.
He was just
I was walking around at 41 weeks, 5 centimeters, So they're like, okay, well, we'll just get scheduled an induction for 42 weeks. We don't want you going past 42. I go to the hospital at 42 and I think 1 day. I'm now 6.5 centimeters, just chill, no contractions, nothing. So they do the Pitocin, and I'm sitting there and I'm like laughing, and it's fine. And I'd have a contraction and like not feel it. So they were going in really soft and gentle. And then they're like, okay, it's still taking a little bit long. We're going to up the Pitocin. And then his heart started having a bad reaction to the Pitocin. So every time they'd administer the Pitocin, his heart rate would dip, and it kept happening. And one time, like the alarms went off and they rushed in, and like that's not a good feeling.
Right. And it's again puts you in
doubt in your
fight
body.
or flight when you're supposed to be the most in your body you've ever been. You're sitting in fight or flight, like with all these like foreign surroundings, people rushing in, things happening, and your body is like in complete survival mode when it's literally supposed to be on like you're supposed to be on psychedelic like Laborland hormones, it's like it's crazy. And that's the other interesting thing. I listen to a lot of Free Birth Society podcasts, which again, very radical approach to birthing, and I think like I land in the middle of, I like to have support, but I wanted to try to like do it on my own, and I just like kept listening to all these birth stories of like women who were doing breech births on their own, and like it just like really for me gave me knowledge and like visualization to be like, wow, okay, like I kind of know what to expect now. I'm gonna like go into this with like a certain mindset. But like I just like, it's so interesting how many people always say like, right, like thank God you were in the hospital, and it's like, wait, which of those interventions
it might not
potentially
have
like could have caused like the downstream like the trauma effects ultimately. And again, we all like labor and birth is traumatic no matter what. Like that's what I always say. It's like, even if you have the most peaceful, blissful 2-hour labor and delivery, you still went through trauma. So did the baby. Like coming out, like it's trauma no matter what. But it's like, it's so interesting just like hearing like different women's perspectives on everything, and like how sometimes their bodies do take over and like are trying to like shoot these protective mechanisms out and around. And also like what you said about the 6 centimeters dilated, it's so interesting because my midwife, she's like this ancestral boss of a woman. She's been doing it for 30 years. She does like twin breech births. Like she's crazy. She's amazing.
Whoa.
She's like insane. Like she's a honest to goodness, she's probably seen every type of birth you can imagine. And she's like, it's so funny that doctors will like literally go and like look at how dilated the cervix is when it has no indication on how far the woman is progressing towards labor. Like you could be walking around for weeks at like 5 centimeters, and it doesn't necessarily indicate that you're going to go into labor anytime soon.
It
you
didn't
could walk
for
away.
me.
You could be walking around for 3 weeks at 3 centimeters. Like it doesn't actually indicate whether or not you're going to go into labor. Ultimately, yes, is it a good like, okay, like if you're 8 centimeters, 9 centimeters dilated, yeah, you're pretty close to like basically delivering. But you could be at a certain number for weeks and just be hanging out, and baby's just it's dilating slowly. And it's so interesting because she really changed my perspective on that. And she's like, it's not actually a good marker. And we go and we get so invasive, like as medical professionals, they get so invasive up there, and they poke and they prod and they burst, like they puncture the water, and it's like, what is that effect ultimately? Like, what is that doing? And yeah, she's like a matron. She's like she just like carries the matronly wisdom. And you're just like, wow, have you written a book? Like I would read every part of your book.
The twin thing is interesting too, because so my mom was a twin, and then my husband, his sister has twins, so we have like twins on both sides. Are you gonna have twins in your family? I don't know. So I'm like, I feel like I want to know a little bit more just in case that ever does happen, because to me, we used to have vaginal births for twins, and then somewhere it turned into no matter what, you are having a C-section, and the baby is going to probably be 4 to 6 weeks early. They're going to have to stay in the NICU for at least a month, which we know has long-lasting effects psychologically.
And that's not entirely true, because full term for a twin is actually technically, I think, 35 or 36 weeks.
Oh, is
They're
it?
technically considered, like, by like clinical standards, they're considered like full term. Most of the time, I would say like maybe if there's like C-section intervention, then there could potentially be some sort of problems. But it's crazy because what she always tells me, my midwife, she would say, yeah, just like breech, twin birth is a variation of normal. And we've been doing it for a long time. And like, yes, does it carry its own set of risks?
Because the cords,
absolutely,
like 2 cords, or
well, even still, she, so many of my friends have done home births, and the cords will be wrapped around the necks three times, and it's a non-event. They unwrap them. They're like, oh look, because the baby isn't like breathing air yet. It's been in the womb. It hasn't had a bunch of oxygen to be breathing. So when the baby comes out with a cord around its neck, it's actually very and it's got something called, what's it called? It's a jelly. So the cord is a jelly, and it doesn't actually like suffocate them. It's got what is it called? I can't remember the name. It's like a type of jelly cord, and it doesn't actually like tighten very hard. And sometimes babies will actually wrap themselves around the cord as a protective mechanism, I've heard. For certain, it has prevented certain things from happening, and I can't remember exactly what, but there's a lot of reasons why sometimes babies will wrap themselves around, or they'll be wrapped. But breech births, some like they don't have as common, but twins will sometimes have that. And like my midwife said, she's like, it's a non-event, 99% of the time. It's like it doesn't mean anything.
Whoa, I had no idea.
Right.
Yeah.
And they also bring a level 1 hospital to your house, like midwives do.
Okay.
They bring equipment. Like they know what's up. Like they can do a lot in like a house. Like you'd be surprised. Like luckily I haven't had to experience it, but like they come prepared. So it's very interesting the way that they work, and it's really cool, especially if you find one that's like been doing it a really long time.
Yeah, that's what you would want.
Someone that has somebody who's gone around the block, like 30 years experience, say no more. Like you've seen everything, you know? Yeah. You might have twins.
Yeah.
Whoa.
We'll see.
Are you done, or you think you want more?
No, I feel like having a baby is a massive transformation, not only for you on an individual level, but for like the family unit, and then also for like your romantic dynamic.
Totally.
And like each one requires a different level. Like it's almost like a different level of the video game. So 1 was like, okay, we got this. 2, it's like, okay, well now we just upped the ante a little bit.
Like,
and
definitely.
It's like, how do you not lose yourself, like your own identity? How do you keep the relationship healthy?
Right.
How do you give your kids everything that they need? And then there's going to be a tipping point with that number. And I think everyone's going to be different. So I'm a little bit nervous because I feel like this second one, we prioritized making everything as normal as possible for our first. Like we wanted to make sure that he was still getting attention and love and care, and like he didn't have to suffer the consequences of my healing. But then that left me feeling completely abandoned. And like it was a really rough part of my marriage was like the second like recovery. And I'm like, I don't know if our marriage can handle like another one.
That's very valid, and not a lot of people talk about that. Like I haven't heard that many. I think people focus so much on the babies like that come that like your marriage, like our marriage had to radically change. And that's everybody who welcomes like a child into their lives. Like you have to sit down and like, 1, make time for each other. And that's just 1. Like I'm like thinking now about 2, and I'm like, the pace of our lives, it's going to be a whirlwind. Like you have to like be so intentional.
But siblings are so great though, when you see them.
I know. I want another one already. I'm like, he's 8 months and I'm already like, I want another one.
That's usually when it starts kicking in, because like their personality starts really coming out, and they're usually sleeping. So it's that time where most women get that pull. Like, but I'm telling you, when they run and like hug each other, and I'm just like, there's nothing better. There's nothing better.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, I'm gonna love this, like that when that happens. I think I need a little time to recover. I want to nourish. I want to like rebalance my minerals and like heal myself a little bit. I'm like, I know like some gals who like 7 months in, they're already pregnant again. I'm like, you guys are crazy. Like, but like in the best way, because I wish I could do that, but I'm like not there mentally yet, you know?
You'll know when
like
you're
my
ready.
husband and I are like, we're just now getting the hang of this one. Like let's give it a little bit more time. and then we'll talk about
Ours are like 2 months or 2 years and 7 months apart.
Oh, that's a good age.
And it's worked for us. Like it's a really good dynamic,
age
and they're thick as thieves already, which you wouldn't think is the baby's like 17 months, but
still.
I mean, they're already wrestling. And then if I like yell or snap, then my oldest is like, "You don't talk to my brother that way."
That's
and I'm
so
like,
cute.
"You go, dude. That's
I
right.
love
You
that.
tell me."
I love
yeah.
that. That's like what I create. I kind of want to have 3. Like part of me is like 3 sounds good. Then I'm like, is one left out?
That's
like,
I'm like, I would need 4. Especially if I had,
and then
if it was another
and then I
boy.
need 6, and then oh my god, girl math. And
Girl
I'm like,
math
how
with
many years will I be
babies.
pregnant?
Right. And then breastfeeding. Like, when is my body going to be mine?
I'm
but
like,
if you have 3 that are all the same, then one is going to be left out. So if the third one was a girl, then I would be like, it's okay. They'll protect her and whatever. But if it's
2
another
boys
boy,
and a girl was kind of like what I was trying to like think potentially go for. I was like, okay, my next one, I really want it to be a boy. And then after that, then it can be a girly. Like, that'd be cute.
Yeah. You like have this picture, and then God's like, no, you're going to have all boys.
Yeah. And then my friend, she bought me like this thing, and I was like, because I was joking the other day, I was like, I wonder if I will be an all boy mom, because I feel like I have that chaotic energy that boy moms just need. Like, there's a difference between, like, you know this, there's a difference between being a girl mom and being a boy mom.
Yes.
Like, and I'm like learning that, and my kid is 8 months and he's a firecracker, like chaotic as hell, and like shows his frustration. He's got my husband and I's attitude, and I'm like, oh, good God, when this boy is a teenager,
Buckle up.
I am going to be like screaming from the front door, like, Dad, Luca, get in. Like, I will literally have to channel some chaotic energy if he's anything like my husband was as a kid.
Yeah, they say like with a girl, you can leave her coloring and you can come back and she's still coloring. With a boy, you come back and he's on the roof and the house is orange and you're like, what is happening? Where's the dog? I don't know.
Literally, like, you turn around and they've like stripped down their butt naked. You're like, oh my God.
Mine is still doing this thing where he like loves peeing in public, and I keep trying to tell him not to. And like, I went to look for him the other day and he's in the front yard peeing, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I just had to go.
I honestly, I like, Luca's already showing signs of this like chaotic boy energy. He like screams like it's like a screech, and he already like pulled his pants down. He's like 8 months. I'm like, dude. Like, we haven't even gotten to like the potty training phase or anything like that, and I'm just like, oh, we're in for a ride. Like,
But
I can
it's
already
great.
tell, but it's gonna be so fun. Yeah,
It's so great. Fun. So when you like in the newborn stage, did you guys ever go through that roommate phase?
Yes.
How did you guys get out of it? Because it's like, I think the easiest thing to do is to blame the other person. You can't get mad at a baby.
Him that I was pregnant. You know, like when you're like at that end of pregnancy, you're like, you
did this to me.
made me like this. Like, you did this to me. Like, and of course, like, ultimately you like love your partner. But there was like 2 months, I'd say, where we fell into that roommate phase. Like, for sure. Because I'm just like drained of all energy and all life, it felt like, and I was just so consumed, and breastfeeding is such a labor, and like we're not living in tribal communities where we've got all this extra like womanly support, to where you're leaning on your partner so much more than you would in a lot of other cultures. Like, again, I talk so much about traditional Chinese medicine, but like it's very common in TCM, where the mothers and the grandmothers even and the sisters come and rally around that mom for the first 2 some months, and they are like a really serious support system, because your husband is also working, potentially he's providing a lot. Like, it depends on like the dynamic of your relationship, but he's already expending so much energy in other areas that having him help me on top of everything else is like, it was so draining for him and me. And you don't have that same support. So we fell into that roommate phase for like a good 2 months, I'd say, like postpartum. And I just like, there was just more just like drained arguing than necessary. Like, where it's like you're so tired, but you're still arguing like, well, I need you to do this because I'm like up doing this and this. And then all of a sudden, like, in order for him to get sleep, he was like sleeping on the couch, like here and there, and like I would take the bed, and then like that makes a difference, because then you're disconnected from your partner, and you're like trying to nurture this little tiny human who's like keeping you up all night. And I mean, I'm so honestly like so surprised when I hear like people haven't gone through that phase. I'm like, that's impressive if you're living in like a Western culture, like we are. Like that phase is hard, like, because then you're just like so emotional, like with the hormones, and you're like, and
no
my
one
partner
loves me,
and nobody loves me anymore, and I'm all night and fat and trying to recover, and then my boobs are bleeding. It's so bad. It's a really, really hard thing. And, like, the women that, like, get through postpartum and, like, champion it, like, I would say I did have, like, a really good postpartum in a lot of senses. Like, I did feel like my body became my own again really quickly, and I'm, of course, not expecting that, like, the second or third pregnancy, but my body did become, like, kind of my own again. The energy and the lack of sleep was so hard for me that I get really cranky when I don't get sleep, and I snap. And so, like, a lot of the issues that we were having was because of me. Like, and I know that. Like, because my husband is, he cooks, he cleans, like, he's there for me. And so, like, I know, like, a lot of the issues were created from me. Like, you know?
But
and
that
then
self-awareness is great.
So I'm like, I was like, I really had to check myself, because I was like, Abby, like, this is all you, dude. Like, you need to get a grip.
Yeah.
But I was like, but I can't get a grip because my hormones are everywhere and I'm not sleeping. So, yeah, I know what you're talking about with that.
So that's like, it's amazing, but that's where my hesitation comes with the next one. Then with my genetics, I'm like, and it's going to be twins, and they're probably going to be boys. And then when I have it, you know what I mean?
Like, so when does a nanny come into play? Because twins?
Yeah, you would need one.
Oh, man.
So the nanny thing is interesting. We've now gone through 3.
Okay, and it's been it's tough to find somebody.
It's so hard to find someone that you trust, let alone someone that's going to want to be there, like develop a relationship with your kids. And then if they just kind of up and leave, then you have to explain that.
Yeah.
You know, so right now our nanny, she was with us for a little over a year, the most recent one, kind of left a little
wonky.
Yeah, like it was just kind of a little bit of a surprise. So there wasn't like a ton of preparation either for like our schedules or like emotionally preparing our child for it. And right now he's going through it. It's almost like he's kind of behaving like he got broken up with and he doesn't know why. So he's just kind of been going around with this sadness. And I'm like, is it because like so and so left? Like, do you miss her? And he's like, yeah, I do. And we were driving and he goes, that's her favorite restaurant. We gotta go there sometime. And I'm just like aching for him.
Oh my God, that would break my heart.
So it's hard. So it's like
break my heart.
I don't want to hire someone that's gonna be here for a year again. Like I want to be like, you have to be here for a while.
Well, that's like such an interesting thing that my husband and I were talking about. Well, and my friend, she's pregnant right now. She's Argentinian and my husband's Peruvian. So South America does things like way differently than here. And we were kind of comparing notes. And it's interesting because nannies in the US get paid really well.
Especially mine.
Really well. Exactly. They get paid really well, and their sole responsibility is looking after the kids. Okay? In South America, you get this matronly, typically, like either you'll get like a young girl who's so motherly, or you'll get like an older woman who's so matronly and doesn't just watch the kids. The kids are literally practically she becomes literal family, which I feel like is different here. She becomes like a part of the family. She works for the family for years, especially if she's taken care of. And the kids grow up like with this like matronly figure who not only watches the kids, helps, like, because for example, if I'm in Peru, like we're gonna have an extra like help in that respect because we go down there in March, and they're responsible for cleaning the house, cooking home-cooked meals, watching the children, like all these additional tasks where it's like can be kind of hard to do all of it when you have kids. But like if you want to be with the kids, she'll go make dinner. If you need her to run groceries, she'll go and like do that. But it's like very different than I feel like American nannies sometimes, because they're just like matronly, and they stay there for years and years and years. And they become like a grandma or like an abuela, you know, like they become an abuela basically. And so it's like so hard because here I just feel like that culture, like that nanny, it's like it's different. I don't know why, like, but we were talking about it because the same concern was, oh, if you have somebody that comes into the house, like, will they leave after a year?
Yeah, that's like a big, like, you are having a really big impact on my child, and I don't want you to take that for granted or like not seriously enough. And I think that's a problem if you get someone that's too young. And then the problem with everyone older that I found is they have families here, so if we travel, that's not really available to them. And I want someone who can come with us and help while we're on the road. Yeah,
it's so true.
So it's hard.
It is.
It's
so
really hard. But we're in the process of looking
for a new au pair. Like, have you done any au pair style?
I don't.
But
again, I like my
it's
privacy, so it's like be here and then like go home. I want to be able to sit on the couch with my husband at night.
Totally. And au pairs also potentially will leave depending on their like status here.
Right, because that was someone was suggesting that, and it's way cheaper to get an au pair. But someone was saying like if you get someone from Sweden, it's like $10,000 for the year, which is crazy. But then they live with you, and then as soon as they kind of get their green card, they're out.
Yeah.
So I don't want that situation either.
I know. It's so hard to figure out. I think like one, I'm like managing right now. Then two, I'm going to be like, it's time.
And you also need date
time
nights,
for help.
you know? You need to be able to go out with your husband.
You need to have that flexibility. 100%. Like, oh my gosh. Because then you get into the roommate phase again.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot longer than you would ever want it to be. And that's just not healthy, you know?
No, you need to be doing, it's like life will get in the way, and then you stop having sex, and then once you stop having sex, it gets like
everything
weirder.
goes downhill.
It does. And then it's weirder and weirder, and you're like, who makes the move? And I'm also tired, and then when are we going to? Like, do we schedule it? Which the answer probably should be yes, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the moment that you realize that it starts getting awkward or you start feeling less romantically inclined to your partner, it's like, okay, you need to have sex now.
It's time to like
now.
Literally, I don't care if you
jump
don't
in the
want
shower.
to, like just like let's
It's
go.
like watering your plant. You need to do it. It's withering.
It's true. And honestly, I think that's why you go through the roommate phase, especially the first few months of postpartum, because you're healing and you literally can't have sex. So like you go through that phase of like trying to recover yourself, you're not being intimate with your partner, and then you get into this like weird roommate phase. So like when you're trying to reinitiate after like very traumatic event occurring, you're also like, I'm kind of nervous. Like this is not going to be fun for me. Like the first few times, not fun. Like it's And that's where the roommate phase, I think, honestly, that might be like one of the biggest reasons why like we had it. Is because it was like that lack there. You're like, oh, I just realized that.
Oh, for sure. And then like, again, sleeping in different beds. It's like all these little things compile.
You just like separate yourself in so many ways that you before. And he was the only guy in my life before, you know, like the main guy. So yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah,
I mean, your guys' dynamic, I think, seems really beautiful because obviously he's an entrepreneur. Like he's a chef. He has restaurants. You guys are talking about a second restaurant. You have a podcast. You were also a huge role of like, it was the Health Institute.
Yeah, the Health Institute.
Until recently, which I just found out this morning that you left.
I had to take a step back for like a number of reasons, but because I'm going to work on a new project, but I just like also was hitting burnout in a lot of ways with like the company, mostly like I'd say like just also having a kid. I like was not able to like perform. Like I felt like I was just like living and getting dragged by my hair every morning, and like trying to like divvy up so many responsibilities, and we're like moving and Luca, and I was just like, I was like running myself into crazy burnout. And I was like, this is a huge red flag. Like, I need to step back in a lot of ways and just like completely recalibrate myself. Because again, it's still postpartum, even if you're 8 months. Like, you're still postpartum, even if you're like 20 months. You know, it's process.
Yeah. And if you're not doing things right, I heard it can be up to 10 years. But it can take up to 10 years to get back to like your baseline before kids, whether it's like mineral depletion, nutrients, energy, vitality, just all of those kind of biomarkers. So for some women, that is insane.
Yeah. No, I feel it still in my body, you know, like, and that's the thing is like, I also was having bad issues with like, I know we've been talking forever, but I had bad issues with my like feminine and masculine sides being really imbalanced.
Yeah, me too.
And I like have always been a type A, like go-getter. Like, I will tell you how it is. Like, I will be so honest with you. I will be so straightforward, direct. Like, I kind of fall into that like really need to achieve. And for me, it was like, I think I was just living in my masculine so much that when I had a baby and had to like kind of shift into more feminine, motherly energy while working a job that I was like pretty like on the, you know, on the ball with, I just realized that I was having to like play these two totally different roles where I'd like switch and I'd be like feminine here and then I'd switch and I'd be masculine, and then I was just confusing myself. And then I got like so out of balance because I was really used to my like masculine kind of being the dominant one, to where I was like, wait, I think I need to sit with myself and like figure out how to be like a little bit more like a feminine, nurturing like woman, like if I'm gonna have like children. And yeah, I had to like shift a lot of priorities recently because I realized it was taking a toll on me, Rodrigo, Luca, because I wasn't happy. And I was like, whoa, I need to reset. Because I naturally, like, again, love projects, love to have my hands in different things with different people working on stuff. So it was like, it took a lot for me to like step back and say, okay, you need to take like just a couple months before you like dive into like something again or go back or whatever, to like figure out how to balance yourself better, because this is super unhealthy. Even with social media, it's like, okay, I just need to like sometimes just shut it off and hang out.
Yeah, it takes all of your time. Like you're there and then you're like, how did an hour go by? This is insane. I have so many other things to do.
So true.
But I think when you become a mother, especially if you're someone that is traditionally leaning in your masculine, because that is me to a T.
To a T, yeah. Maybe that's why we're boy moms.
Probably. It was just that high T in ourselves.
I was thinking that. I was like, maybe that's why we're boy moms.
But it makes you be way more intentional with your yeses. So instead of just saying yes to every opportunity that's thrown at you or every project, you're like, well, I now understand the cost of this yes.
Totally.
So I'm going to be way more discerning when I actually use it. And then you feel less guilty when you say no, or you feel less guilty when you're not being, quote, productive and you're just laying in the grass with your kids. You're like, no, this is productive.
I'm raising little tiny humans,
right?
And they are like learning from me like what it is to be like real and live in a real world with like, you know, without technology. It's like that is like what a big thing I've been trying to like keep my screen away from Luca and like really just like be outside with him and like entertain him in those ways where it just like helps you disconnect. And like, yeah, I don't feel as guilty about it because it's a reframing for me where it's like, oh, this is like so good for you. And honestly, I think in the last like month or two the last month that I've been gone, I have like healed my my parasympathetic nervous system, because I just realized that I was like in fight or flight response 24/7, drinking coffee, trying to keep up. And I was able to just like cut all of that and just like wake up in the mornings and be like, okay, you don't have a lot of responsibilities right now. Like, just like take like a couple months before you dive back in. And it's healed me like a lot. And Rodrigo was like, I've even noticed it about you. Like, I notice that you're more interested in being with me and like you're there, you're present with me talking, like, and you're interested in like what I'm doing and what I'm talking about, and you're not like thinking about something else while we're in conversations, which is what I would do so much. Like, I'd just be like in another world, and he would just kind of like feel like second, like on the back burner. And yeah, I had to have a reality check with myself, because I was like, that is like what we do here in like the US. Like, that's like so natural for us. And it's kind of like what's praised. And I was like, I had to be okay with like just being for a little bit. And again, I'm very blessed because we have the ability to do that right now, and not everybody does. And it's like, how do you balance that? And I like I'm aware of like that is like a blessing, like to be able to do. So I just have to like look at it as such, you know?
Yeah, because it's like, what do you do if you don't have a husband or a wife to help you out.
Exactly.
And you have to work 2 jobs. Like there are no other options. And then you see all this social media content with people guilting people over daycare.
Right.
And
it's like
what do you want them to do?
I know. I saw
instead?
Alex Clark's. Like I was following like that whole thing.
What
and,
what are these moms supposed to do?
Exactly. It is literally you are in handcuffs. Like there is no like better answer. I mean, and it's really sad that that's like the reality of the U.S. And we could talk about the politics behind that all day long.
Because it does seem nefarious and intentional to kind of like separate.
Double income, double taxes, take the mother out of the home, daddy government. I think
Yeah, exactly. Now who's raising your kids if it's not you?
It's not you. It's somebody else. And it's not exactly ideal. Yeah, it's so true. It is. I feel like we could probably go on all
Jamie's
day.
Like, are they done yet? I mean, I'll have to have you back on.
We'll have to do this again.
We'll do a part 2.
When you come
We're
to
gonna do
Boca,
a series. Yeah.
When you come to Boca or something, when I'm there, we have to do something.
When are you moving?
Okay,
What's the plan?
We were moving to Peru for 5 months in March, but we're gonna kind of like dabble. We're selling our house. Like our house got like kind of destroyed from the hurricane.
I saw
all the
Holy
yard.
cow.
I was like, oh my god, I'm not doing this again. So we were like, we're selling, and we just had like a cute little like beach shack. Like we did not expect to get pregnant. We were living there and in New York City, so we were like back and forth, and it just kind of like it's too small now for us, like for sure. And we were gonna renovate our garage into like a studio, but we were like, no, we just need to move. So we're gonna leave for March for Peru for a little bit and have like a little bit of extra support. Rodrigo's mom is gonna be down there because she lives mostly in Spain, but she's gonna come and stay with us for a while. And then we are back in August. We're gonna go back and move to, I think, Miami. So we'll probably find a place by then. But
We'll
I think
be
we're gonna
down.
move
Let me
north.
know.
I know. It'll be
Yeah.
so fun, especially if you're already down there. You guys you already have a crew that you're recording down there with.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that the cancel? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's a good group of you guys.
Thank
you guys are funny.
They are maniacs, those two.
How did you meet them? They're hilarious.
So Gerard,
all of you guys. Like, I would literally just love to be a fly on the wall and give my input for some of those conversations.
Oh my gosh. So Gerard, I was doing like a cooking show on Twitch for a little bit.
Oh, cool.
And then Gerard knew someone at, I think it was like Comcast. It was one of those networks. And they were
Yeah.
thinking about pitching an idea with us doing a show together. This executive's wife had a problem with me in my past, so they like nipped it in the bud. And then I didn't talk to Gerard for years. And then I'm pregnant with my second child. He calls me in like, wait, if you knew Gerard, like the story just makes sense. I could barely hear him because the windows are down. And he's like, "Hey yo, Candy baby, what are you doing? I'm in the car with Mickey Gall, UFC undefeated fighter. We're gonna be passing through Wilmington. You want to do a show?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, okay, sure." Who's he talking about? So
it's incredible.
I did episode 3 of his Slick and Thick show. It went viral, so they were like, "Okay, there's something with this dynamic." And we waited a little bit, and I just felt like this show is great. It's long format. It's with a guest. It tends to be a little bit like more softer and feminine.
Right, a little bit more feminine. Totally.
Yeah. And then this other thing on the side kept poking me.
It's like, what are your thoughts on it? And you guys just go in, and I'm like, this is incredible. Like, this is the content that we need. There's not a lot of people broaching this content. Like, besides, you get the Joe Rogans and but like with the comedian aspect, it's like, it's so funny.
They're ridiculous. So yeah, we did a couple episodes, and we're like, there's something here. Yeah. And it took off bigger than both of our independent shows out the gate. So we're
just the name itself is so good.
Thanks, yeah.
So like, it's just like, it's everything that you kind of want in a podcast.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, they're gonna talk about shit that nobody else, is gonna touch. Because you guys, did you talk about Abigail Schreier recently on one of them we Joe talked Rogan? Yeah. I read that whole book cover to cover.
Oh my gosh.
Irreversible Damage. Yeah. It's like, it's insane.
Insane.
I
think every parent needs to read it, especially if you have a kid in school.
They literally was like, I don't know if I want to send my child to school.
Well, if you ever think about moving back to Wilmington,
you're like, we're gonna hire private teachers and do a co-op.
Even better. So I ended up on a plane next to Tim Kennedy.
Oh my god,
we
I
talked
love him.
the whole flight, and we exchanged information. And I was like, well, surely once he finds out who I am, like, this is not going to be a conversation. He found out who I was. he was like very cool with it. He's like, I'm in no position to judge anybody. You seem like you really love your kids, and I'm going to apply to try to open up one of his schools here. So we shall see. It's like it's a very stringent process.
Like if I ever,
he trains you for like a year.
Maybe we need to open a restaurant in Wilmington.
I mean, that's my husband's area of expertise
tonight.
Yeah. So my one of the kids in my son's class right now, his dad owns that.
Oh yeah, is his name
Dean?
Dean. Okay, my friends became friends with him, Dean, and so tonight we're going for the first time, and Rodrigo's excited because we're like, we haven't been to like a nice restaurant in Wilmington. Like I'm excited to like try it and see how it is.
You're gonna love it. Get all the oysters. Ask him to do. There's this one with like fried chicken on top, like a hot fried chicken.
Okay.
It sounds
so good.
It's insane.
That sounds so good.
He's an excellent chef.
You'll have to meet my husband.
I want to. I was like,
if
is
you guys
she
are
bringing?
Also in the, I know. Well, he was like, oh man, maybe I should come. And then I was like, with Luca, he was like already ready to like go to sleep. He's like, I should probably go back to the house. Like, okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to like get
Try
together
something.
at some point because my
to.
family all lives in Charlotte. So literally, I take my like my family's extra car that they have just sitting in the driveway, and me and Rodrigo like will like drive around like the Carolinas. We were like in Tennessee. We came to like Wilmington, and we're like we love it.
That's
we love
awesome.
it so much. So we'll have to do something. That'll be so cool.
You're gonna have so much fun tonight.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This was so fun.
Yeah,
we have to do this again.
Thank you. Please.
Like,
absolutely.
I would love to do something again.
Yeah.
It was so
Anytime.
fun. We could probably go on.
Like, open
for
invitation.
Hours.
I know. I looked at the time like, I can't believe we've been going for this long.
So good.
And I still have so many pages of notes. I told you that was what
we'll do a part two. We'll have to do a part two.
Stay tuned, everybody.
We just hit the
Before we wrap up, do you want to tell everyone where they can follow you, projects you're working on, about your podcast, all that good stuff?
I am Abby Fernandini on Instagram, and I'm also launching a website. I've been trying to take time for myself, but I've also been working on stuff. You know, you're like, I'll just like dabble. I'm launching a website, holisticabby.com, so it'll have like all of my blogs. Like, I was like, should I do a Substack? And then I was like, no, I'm just gonna do like blogs on my own page and on my own site. So, and just like all my thoughts on various topics. So that's what I've been working on. It'll be like live soon. It's kind of live already, but not like
a hard launch.
We haven't done the hard launch. We've done like a soft launch, not
exactly.
the hard. Yeah.
I'll link everything below. If you want to support this podcast, you can go to chattingwithcandice.com, Patreon, or click that little link that says buy me a coffee. And thank you for tuning in. Bye, everybody.